Okay, we should be good to go.
All righty, thank you, Becky. With that, I'd like to call the work session with with our school board and the assembly to order. If we could, it's Thursday, February 26th, 6 p.m. meeting. And I'm going to have everybody go around and introduce themselves. But first of all, I want to recognize our representative, Rebecca Himshoot. And with that, Rebecca, I'll just have everybody go around here. I'll start here and we'll go around so you get to see everybody and know, put names to faces if you can remember.
Love
Like
it.
me, I can't. All right, with that, I'm Bob Lynn. I'm the mayor here, and there's a few people here I don't know, so we're doing all right. And I'll go over here to Mr. Valentine.
James Valentine, Assembly Member.
Steve Giesbrecht, Borough Manager.
I'm the borough clerk. I don't think you can see me, Rebecca, but I've met you before.
Hi, Becky.
The school district finance director, Shannon Baird. Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi, Rebecca. It's Robin, the school superintendent.
Hey, Robin. Good to see you guys.
Hi, I'm Carrie Case. I am a school board member.
And I'm Kari Peterson, a school board member. Katie Holmland, vice president of the school board.
Mark Taylor, School Board.
My name is Aaron Morrell. I'm the Petersburg Borough Public Works Director.
Hi, Rebecca. Bob Martin here, freshman assembly member.
Hi, Bob.
Rob Schwartz.
Hi, Rob. I met your dad.
I'm sorry.
No, he had a lot to say.
Yeah. And with that, I'll move right into the agenda. And I asked, Rebecca asked to be put on first so she could go on to greater things here. But, and I sent Rebecca a kind of a list of topics that we'd like to talk about. I know one thing you really would like to know is where school funding is. And so I've asked her to address a number of things along those lines. So, and then also to address where the task group is and what kind of recommendations are coming out and so forth. So with that, Rebecca, I'll just turn it over to you and let you go forward.
Thanks a lot, Bob. And thanks for, there's nothing better than Petersburg for me to go on to tonight, but I do have a pile of emails I need to get through. So thanks for letting me go so early in the meeting, and thanks for having me tonight. I thought I'd start just with the task force in House Bill 57, which also became the vehicle for a funding increase for schools. We created an education funding task force. Our formula was last, let's say, reworked, updated in 1998. So it's time to take a look at it. One thing that I think causes some suffering around the state is we do have a statute that says we're supposed to update the district cost factor part of the formula every, I think, 5 years. Robin might know if I'm right. I don't think it's 2, I think it's 5. And we haven't done it for 20 years. And the big rub there is it would probably change Anchorage and Matsu to decide who gets the 1 and who gets the 1.1 or whatever. And so that's a big battle between our major population bases. And so I don't see that getting updated anytime soon. But the task force itself is looking at the overall landscape of education funding. And I can just list off for you the meetings we've had and the ones we're planning to have. And then these meetings we hope will generate a list of recommendations. We should have the recommendations published in September, October. And at that point, we may take some public input. We haven't decided yet. A task force doesn't have to do that. But the recommendations we hope will then become bills, and those bills will go through the full public process at that point. So you have, if you think, why have I missed all these task force meetings and I would be giving input? We haven't really invited public input. And I don't have it written down here, but there is an email if you do have ideas for us. And it's the education.funding.task.force@akledge.gov. But I can get that to you, or you can just email me and I'll enter it. But the meetings we've had so far were looking back at the different ways that education's been funded in the state. And then we asked education partners, including the Superintendent's Association, the Teachers Association, school board or school business officials, and the school boards, Alaska Association of School Boards, to give us their ideas. What do they see that we could do differently? We have had a cursory look at the adequacy of our funding, and I can tell you right now what I'm hearing across the state is there's a lot of need. And then we've looked at how other states run their formulas, how they fund their schools. We've looked at chronic absenteeism, attendance, and homelessness, and we've looked at special education. And going forward, we're going to have a meeting on major maintenance on March 9th and transportation costs on March 16th. And then, well, I'm not sure this is confirmed, but charter correspondence in residential schools at some point after that, accountability and administration, and teachers. We've also done site visits to the Matsu, Anchorage, Kenai, Fairbanks, Nenana. And you'll notice really only Nenana there is rural and none of those is remote. And so I'm pushing very hard to make sure the task force gets out to some remote sites. So we may not come to a Southeast Alaska school, as much as that makes my heart ache, because I think it's important to get to some schools, more REAA type schools in Western Alaska. And so the task force, so the difference between the task force and the regular work of legislative committees, the task force is looking at how we do what we do. And then our legislative body is looking at how much to fund, basically. So the how much to fund part is what I want to talk about next. So there's a lot of capacity building going on right now to talk about maintenance in schools. We have our major maintenance list. It comes to a total of $520 million, but I want to add the caveat that only about 60% of school districts participate. Petersburg participates in the school major maintenance capital improvement program, but 40% of our districts don't, because you have to maintain a 6-year plan. You have to get engineering reports. There's an expense to it that some districts have just said our odds of getting funded aren't good enough to actually be worth the expenditure of time and resources. So Petersburg, however, is on the list in 4 places. And the way the list works is, you see, we have a total of 103 projects on the FY27 list. And what the legislature does is we name an amount. And so by having all the projects vetted by the Department of Education, they have a committee that involves department people, but also maintenance people, engineers, that kind of thing. They evaluate every application, and that generates a rank ordered list. And then we provide a certain amount of funding down through the top projects, down through a certain number. And I think last year we funded 10 projects, and 7 of those were vetoed. So I have the document of all 103 projects. We know what we need to do. I have the feeling if any funding comes towards schools this year, it's going to be more towards major maintenance. The problem that causes me is, causes all of us, is that funding for major maintenance will help those schools who are funded, those districts that are funded, but it doesn't do anything for other districts. So if we fund through the BSA, we're funding everybody. Everybody gets something. So all of the things that we might do this year, whether we look at transportation again, maintenance, student nutrition, like there are different ways that we could get some funding to the schools. And I think you all know how tight the budget is. So if we didn't do a BSA increase, there might be other ways that we get funding to schools. But to me, it doesn't feel as equitable as going through the formula where everybody gets something. So Petersburg is number 22 on the list with the Aquatic Center sewer line repair, which I read in the pilot that some fast action, or maybe that was the electrical thing. Anyway, so you guys are on there, and then you're also at 25 with your middle and high school security and access renovation. So, and then there's a couple more projects that I'd be surprised if we went any further down the list, but and then, of course, I know Robin and Shannon know all this. You have to provide some kind of a match for anything we do in maintenance. So I'm not going to run through the history of how we got the BSA increase that we did last year, unless you want me to. That was quite a challenge to get done. And my original bill to fund the schools started at $1,808, and that was based on 2011 was when schools had their greatest purchasing power for the dollars we provided. And so I based it on the what would have happened if we'd had inflationary adjustments from 2011 to present. And that resulted in what would have been an $1,800 BSA increase. That was, of course, not politically feasible. So that got whittled down to the $700 increase, and a portion of that was then also struck. And then we had the fairly dramatic special session in August that restored some of that. But all of that left school districts across the state scrambling, just absolutely scrambling. And yeah, I mean, on behalf of the legislature, I guess I want to apologize that we put you guys through everything that we do every year. And then I'll pause there for questions, and then I can talk more about other issues in the legislature or my personal legislation if that's interesting. But I think main thing was probably schools. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, any school board members, anybody have questions for Rebecca before we move on? Everybody's quiet, Rebecca.
Oh, James has his hand up.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
James here. Thank you for being here. You said we're on number 22 and number 5. This is the capital projects list you were saying, and this is like throughout the state, we're number 22? Or
Correct.
just in Petersburg?
No, out of state.
Out of state?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. And then we have more on there, but they're probably lower on that list.
Correct.
Okay, sounds good.
Less likely to be funded the further down you go on the list.
Okay, and then it sounds like for most of the funding, it seems very maintenance based. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, this is the capital improvement
Okay.
list. So major maintenance list.
Okay. Cool.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I jump in?
Sure.
Rebecca, it's Steve.
Steve.
Can you give us a feel for what the mood of the legislature is when it comes to major maintenance? I mean, we have, the state is great for putting these programs together. So the deferred maintenance program for schools, things for harbors, but then they're not so good at funding them. And I know that's not your fault. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but it's what's your take on the mood right now?
Well, I'd say most of us are waiting anxiously for the spring revenue forecast, which should be out in a couple weeks, mid-March. And we have seen the price of oil go up a little bit. So I'm not going to call it optimistic by any stretch, but not quite as dark as it was in January when we first got here, where oil was, $60 a barrel. So I would say that I think we don't agree on a lot of things here, but I think there's general agreement that maintenance is a major issue across the state. And again, where I struggle, and it's, good for Petersburg because you guys are able to maintain your capital improvement plan and get the reports you need to be on the major maintenance list. So it might work out fine for you guys to get some help, but 40% of districts aren't even participating in the program. So the general mood is, I think, what's the right word? There's resolve, I guess, that we need to do something. But bear in mind, I think I'm not sure I have the number right, but it's at least $2 billion worth of deferred maintenance across the state. And the way it works here is everybody wants to build something new. That's, the word they use is sexy. It's wonderful to build a new thing and have it named for you or whatever. And nobody wants to do the work of maintenance. And we're saying, and in the oil boom, all of our things that we built, we were a young state. We needed to build a lot. And those things are now 40, 50 years old. And so you asked for the mood. I will say I would not call it optimism, but I would call it recognition.
Thank you very much.
Other questions before Rebecca moves on? Okay. Why don't you move on to your next part there?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you said I'm supposed to call you Bob, but it just doesn't feel right. I have to call you Mr. Mayor. So, all right. So let's see. Miscellaneous issues in the legislature, as far as sort of the big things that are cooking, House Bill 78 is a public employee pension. And people panic a little bit because we fell into arrears with our previous pension plan. And this is one area where the senator and I don't agree. I think we do need some kind of a public pension option in the state. And the bill to do that right now has all kinds of triggers. If the gap is getting too big, employees put in more, like there's a lot. It doesn't have the gold star healthcare that our TERS 1 and 2 had for teachers and PERS 1 through 3. So it's not as good as what people had before, but it's better than nothing, which is what we have right now. So I'm supporting that bill, and we'll see. You know, everything here takes 21 in the House and 11 in the Senate, and then 1 on the third floor. If we don't have the governor, nothing happens. So the LNG pipeline is
May I interrupt you before you move on to that one?
sure.
My understanding is that that bill passes more liabilities to the boroughs on that. Can you address that at all?
I would have to look at that to be able to say for sure. I don't know that. I mean, it might, but you have quite a liability right now with your turnover as well. So I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a note. I mean, an issue that I'm working on right now, we're in budget closeout and community jails. You guys have a community jail there, and it's
Yes,
never
we do.
fully funded. I don't know, Steve, do you feel like you're fully funded by DOC for your?
No, it's, I mean, through the mayor. You know, Department of Corrections wants to look at it as if it's they should pay based on the number of clients we have. But
Right.
you can't have a client unless you have a jail. I mean, in other words, there's a lot of infrastructure money that goes into having and maintaining that are minimum staffing levels, minimum maintenance levels, or we get in trouble with all sorts of people that like to monitor jails. So when the Department of Corrections wants to look at that particular issue as how many people you have in the jail, and build the funding around that, it just doesn't work. I mean,
No.
you know, our chief has written a nice letter, but you know, if it comes down to it, we're arresting people on behalf of the state.
Right.
We can just stop arresting people, and the state is going to have to pay to transport them. And anyway, it gets ugly, and no one wins in those kind of environments. But yeah, we've heard.
Yep. So AML worked last year to address the standards under which your contract was, so to speak, negotiated. They never really negotiate, they just tell you the amount. But so my understanding is that was a success. It'd been like 30, 40 years since those had been updated. And so the department is saying it's an ongoing thing, and we'll have a better system next year. But I object to them fully funding the privately operated community rehabilitation centers and not fully funding the municipally operated jails. So that's an issue that I'm working on. And we're not going to have the full solution this year. So you're not going to get relief this year financially. But I hope that by next year, if we're successful with the language I'm putting in, that we'll be able to make sure that you have a back and forth and you get to say what it actually costs. Because you have to have the lights on, you have to have it heated, you have to have the thing available. You have to have somebody, if not 24/7, you have to have somebody available when you do have somebody being held. So anyway, not okay to shift that cost onto you guys. So
Thank you very much.
yeah, we'll keep working on that one. The LNG pipeline, back to that. It's really hard to know what's going on. Some people are predicting that we'll end up in a special session to deal with this question. And it just feels like there hasn't been enough information for us to be the 25% owners of this thing. And so I would just say that there's a big question mark around the LNG pipeline. And then we have been facing declining prices for oil, and only in the last week or two has that kind of turned around a little bit. So it's really hard to say what our budget's going to look like, but we do have a supplemental budget that passed out of the House and went to the Senate. And the only way to fund that supplemental, which is of course the difference between what we budgeted and what things actually cost in FY26, and it's a $500 million supplemental budget. And the only place to get that is from savings. And that takes 3/4 of us to say yes. So we're going to spend a lot of this session fighting over that, but that includes things like the match. If you've heard about Meet the Match, for every state dollar invested, we bring in 9 federal dollars. It's one of the highest rates in the nation for well, I shouldn't say road, DOT projects, so mostly roads, but that money was vetoed in last year's budget, and so now we're scrambling to make sure that we get the match money in the supplemental in time for construction companies to be able to have a full construction season. So that's a big one. And then there's disaster relief in there, especially for Western Alaska, and then making up for last year's wildfire season. And we have to repay money we borrowed out of the Higher Education Investment Fund. And then, of course, the Department of Corrections went over budget by over $20 million. And then I'll just mention the Rural Health Transformation Program. You know, I was so hopeful that this was going to help with the medical center. I was like, this is going to be a win, but it's $1.3 billion over 5 years. So that's $272 million that Alaska will spend annually. And we had the highest per capita award in the nation. But of course, you can't use it for construction. So it's limited what can be done with it, but the window to make suggestions is open right now. And I think we put it in my last newsletter, but we can get you the information if you want to put in an application for an idea you have that doesn't involve building something that will improve rural healthcare. And I know Phil is all over it. We had a conversation and he's got great ideas. So yeah, and then I have my personal bills I can talk about, but I don't think that's really all that helpful to folks tonight. So, but I'm happy to take any other questions.
Anybody have questions for Representative Himschoot? I have one on the rural transformation. At some point, in talking with Phil, going back and had a legal look at the rural transformation, the actual legislation itself. What we can't find is anything in that legislation that actually says we cannot build, you know, some kind of structures out of it. So I guess what I'm saying here is at some point, I think we're going to have to go back and revisit it, because to be able to utilize that amount of money effectively in the short amount of time we have to, I think we're going to have to, you know, relook at. And my understanding is that when the state set the criteria on that we're going to, at some point, we're going to need to go back and look at that criteria if we're going to effectively use it. And the other part of that is the penalties associated with that. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but the penalties associated, even if we get the money out of that we've applied for, if it's later determined that we have not, you know, done it correctly, then not only do we pay the money back, my understanding is we pay penalty on top of that. And I think that's got to go back. We got to go back and take a look at that.
You would also not get your full funding the second year. The good news is Senator Sullivan did tell us that I think we're stuck with what we have for this year. I don't think it's going to change for this year. But Senator Sullivan thinks that for next year, it may be possible to use the money for construction. So I don't know why it would change from one year to the next. I have to look into that more. But he heard us loud and clear when we said, what we really need is, you know, to be able to build some things. And I think you can, I don't want to speak out of turn. I was going to say, I think you can purchase equipment, but now I'm not sure I'm right about that. So you can't use it for broadband and you can't use it for building. And I was like, well, that's kind of what it takes to deliver healthcare in rural places. So maybe I'm just not being creative enough, and I'm sure that we will have no problem. I mean, on the scale of things, 272 million sounds like a lot of money, but think about building any one small thing. If you could use it for construction, it's really not a huge amount of money. So anyway, but it's an opportunity for sure.
Yeah, yes. Just keep that in the back of your mind, though, in terms of how that money is used and how we can more effectively. And I happen to agree with our CEO that, you know, to be able to use that my understanding is we have 3 different systems in the state of Alaska to transform records. And
Right.
that's got to change. It's got to go to one system because they're not compatible.
Yep.
You-
I think that's a huge part of what they're going to do this year, and it's at least 3. It might be even more than 3. And that's one of the goals, is to bring those all into one system, which I think is a great investment.
I do too. I think that's a long-term great investment for us.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
The last one from me, promise. You, on the task force meetings you've had, right? You had, how it's been in the past, ideas, adequacy of the funding, and then you said how other states are funding their education. Are there, when you were looking around, I'm sure you didn't do every 50 states, but the ones that you did look at, were there anything like that the other states were doing that was better than what we were doing? Or is it purely just based off of who gets the most money, then they can utilize that the best? Or is there like
Yeah.
something that you learned from another state that we can implement over here to help us? You know, and are we in the crisis state compared to other states? You know, in comparison?
Yeah, I think Alaska's in the crisis we're in, not for any failure of our funding formula, but for our failure to fund the formula. So that's putting us in the crisis we're in. The superintendents and a lot of the sort of partner organizations who work in school leadership felt like our formula is sound, but it needs to be tweaked. So for example, since 1998, we've now gone to kind of a 1-to-1 student computer ratio, and there's no refresh money for that. Maybe we need a technology factor. Some states have what we call an at-risk factor. You know, kids who are experiencing homelessness or whatever, that you include a factor in your formula to help with that. One thing that I'm very interested in is a hybrid model. Alaska used to do a different way of funding, where we said if you have 100 students, then you're also going to have, you know, for every 20 students, you get a certificated educator. For every 100 students, you get a, I don't know, counselor. For every 400 students, you get a nurse or whatever. And I think that there are some basic things that every school should offer that should be operated that way based on the number of kids that you have. So for example, nurses, librarians, counselors, there's no school that doesn't need that. There's no student who doesn't need that support. And so having a hybrid model where we say, no matter what, this is a baseline that we're going to offer to every student in Alaska, and then we'll have our funding formula to put emphasis where we need it. So for special ed students and language learners and gifted kids and that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, I think, I can't speak for the task force, but it really caught my attention that you have some places that are saying there's something that every kid should have, and we're going to make sure that happens. And then we'll fund beyond that through our formula.
Okay, yeah, sweet, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Representative Himshoot? Thank you.
All right. I appreciate you
Great.
guys giving me time tonight, and I wish I had great news like we just discovered a pot of, you know, gold at the end of the rainbow here in Juneau, and we're all going to be fine. And I can't say that. So,
Yep. All right.
all right.
well, we
I'll look
understand.
forward to seeing y'all in the summer at some point.
Good, very good.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Take care. Good
for your
night.
time. Okay, I'll move on here, and it looks to me like Shannon, you're up.
Well, we put together just a couple slides, and I don't want to take too much time. Oh, okay. Perfect. You can go ahead to the next slide. So last year, we had some questions about like our budget to actual variance and our fund balance. And so I kind of wanted to update you on that. Where we ended fiscal year 25, we had another large budget to actual variance of about $500,000. And I want to bring it up because we still have that big fund balance and we're spending that down this year. And our fund balance has to be at 10% by the end of the current fiscal year that we're in. And I did change some budgeting strategies for fiscal year 26 that we're currently in as well. So I don't anticipate we'll have such a large budget variance this year. We started budgeting for an estimated percent of attrition, vacancy, like staff vacancies and turnover in every staff part of the budget, so across the board. And that's gonna, I think, solve most of that problem. And then the next slide. And how we're planning to spend down that fund balance is investing in long-term assets, those being our staff, tools, equipment, and furniture that are extremely outdated and broken down, and then a transfer to capital funds. As you know, we've been doing some capital projects, and we have some others on the slate that we're about to do and that we're getting designs done. You'll probably also remember we had a condition survey done, and a lot of things were identified that need to be done. So the transfer to capital is more than justified, and it'll help us even just do this project this summer. So that's kind of the plan. Proud to get us back down to 10%, and then that's where we'll be at the start of fiscal year 27, is back at that 10%. Next slide. And the capital improvement projects, here's an update. You saw something similar last year, those of you who were here. And so we finished the high school office entry remodel, and the roof has been substantially completed for quite a while, but just a couple final things are waiting on. Yeah, specialty. And so those expense columns, those are actual expenses. So both those projects did come in higher. There were some change orders. There were things that they found as they got into the projects, unfortunately, but also not a surprise. So they came in a little bit higher, but not too bad. And if you remember, we did get a grant, a major maintenance grant from the state for the roof project. And our reimbursement rate on that is 65% from the state, which is great. We're very grateful to have that grant. And what that means is that then we can stretch those bond dollars farther and fund the project coming summer 2026, which is the Petersburg campus security upgrades. And it funds the majority of that project, but it'll still require us to use $350,000 to $400,000 out of our capital fund, which is why that transfer into capital is so necessary. So just an update on that timeline and where those bond dollars have been spent and what that reimbursement looked like, 1.9 million, which has really stretched those bond dollars. And then thinking about fiscal year 27, I'm grateful that Rebecca was on tonight and that BSA increase was huge, $700 increase to the BSA. But as you can see, that still leaves us quite shy of where we should be if it had been kept up with inflation since FY11. So we're still over $1,200 behind where that would have, got us. And also just for reference, that $700 increase to the BSA is only $20 more than the $680 one-time funding we received the year before. So it's now in statute in the BSA, but we were receiving very similar funding the year before as far as BSA dollars. So what that means for fiscal year 27 state funding, that first column, the 6660 BSA, that's what's in statute right now, and that's what we most likely think we're going to get from the state. We're really grateful that we got that increase, and as Rebecca said, there might not be any momentum to do anything more with the BSA right now. And if we get it one time in people transportation or capital, obviously that's still very helpful, but that doesn't help our general fund budget. But we are projecting less students for next year. We're at almost 466 this year, and we're projecting 449.5 next year. We're also projecting a decrease of 2 intensive students, and they're funded times 13 in the funding formula. That's intensive SPED. So our funding in our current fiscal year with that same BSA is over 7 million down there in reference in blue. But we're projecting next year with those student numbers, that same BSA will get us 6.64 million. So that's a pretty big decrease in state revenue we're projecting. And then looking at that borough funding, you've funded us almost right at the cap in fiscal year 25 at 3.4 million. And currently you're funding us at 3.25 million. And you know that partially, mostly because we had this large fund balance and we needed to spend that down, but we'll be back at a 10% fund balance for fiscal year 27. And then based on the projections and the funding formula, which is partially dependent on what we're getting from the state, but the other part of that local max contribution is the taxable assessed value in the borough. And because that has gone up, the max allowable local contribution is also going up for next year, even though the BSA is staying the same and our state funding is actually going down. So the max local contribution that the borough could give us to our general fund would be between 3.6 and 3.7 million. And then I don't know if you guys have heard about it yet, but we have, you can scroll down, thanks, Becky. We have started using a budget simulation tool, and it's called the Balancing Act, the site. So we've put our first draft pro forma budget for fiscal year 27 in, and that's status quo, the same level amount of staffing and the same, you know, a level of programming, but with increases, estimated increases, you know, across the board to staffing and services and insurance and utilities. So it's just our first draft pro forma status quo budget, but that's up live on our website and it's linked here if you don't mind going to it. Just give you a quick look at it. We're starting at about a $278,000 deficit in this pro forma budget. Obviously, this is the first working draft of the budget, so a lot can change up or down between now and June. But, oh, actually, do you mind exiting out that? What first pops up has a lot of really good information. But as you get into it, all those info links, the little I in the circle, everything has some information. So in each area of expenditure or revenue, you can drop down and get into, and then if you actually start like increasing or decreasing things and playing with it, it's going to give you more information. It's going to give you thresholds. It's going to tell you why. So we're really hoping that the community engages and gives some feedback and input in the budget for fiscal year 27. You know, we're not like freaked out about this fiscal year 27 budget starting with this deficit. We feel like, okay, we'll be able to balance this. This is doable, but you know, it might be much more difficult in fiscal year 28 with increased costs, and if the state doesn't generate revenue, you know, we'll probably be getting that same BSA, and we don't know where our student count will be, but our projections for incoming kindergarten classes keep being really small, and our outgoing high school seniors are larger classes, so we'll probably continue to see a decline in our student count. So I really hope that we can get a lot of engagement in this year. I think it's a great education tool for the community to understand our funding and where the money is going and the budget process, and what things really we have control over, right? Like, well, the state revenue, we wish we could just be like, well, just let's increase that BSA and there we go, but balanced budget. But for next year, we'll probably be needing some much more critical feedback from the public. So just getting our feet wet in it this year, and we hope that you guys will hop in and give it a try. There's reset buttons, so if you start playing around and you're like, oh, I need a clean slate, just reset it all. But yeah, the more you click on things, the more you'll learn.
And you won't mess anything up.
Yeah.
So yeah, Becky, if you want to just play around with
And
that,
is it-
and
oh, sorry.
decreasing some things, you'll see that that bar across the top in red right now shows a $278,000 deficit, but every time you enter an action, it will show you the impact up on the bar. And so it's a simulation to try to help us balance the budget. At the end, if you choose to submit, it will give us the feedback as to where the community at large is indicating we should either reduce expenditures or pull from our reserves.
Is this, the numbers that I'm seeing reflective of like Petersburg?
Yeah.
This is
So when
Petersburg.
we go there, then I'm like, okay, this, I can play around and these are the exact numbers that y'all are playing with? Okay.
Yeah, this is our first working draft of the budget that I've imported and worked into here. So this is our draft budget for fiscal year 27 next school year.
Can I ask questions on this? The instructions part, that's like the overall student body. Am I kind of getting that right?
Instruction is general ed instruction, and then SPED instruction is, of course, special education instruction. But instruction just means those direct classroom expenses. So the staff that's directly instructing students in the classroom, the supplies, the things that are directly in the classroom. There's like instruction support, which is like libraries, tech, like a lot of things that go into that instruction are very much a part of it, but they're not the direct teacher, the direct curriculum, the direct supplies for the classroom. And then there's, of course, school admin, district admin, facilities maintenance. But yeah, each one, within each category, there's all the subcategories. And
Go all the way down.
if you increase or decrease staff anywhere in the expense budget, it'll also add or take away from the total certified or classified staff that you see there at the top. So 47 FTE and 31 FTE, that's full-time equivalent. So that's the current staffing level that we have for certified teachers and classified support staff.
So we have 74 people hired right now?
Full-time equivalent means that's full. We have quite a lot of people that work like 3/4 days or, a 0.9, a 0.8, a point. Yeah. So we have 2/3, we have half-time people. So we have like 90 employees, but we have 78 FTE.
Never mind. No. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, hop on there and play around with it, and there's a link on here. Well, this is linked on the website on the financials page, but then also on this site, there's a link to go to that financials page, which has a lot of information, has my contact information. So hop on there and contact me if you have questions.
I got a puzzling question for you. You show a decrease in enrollment, but what we're seeing is no decrease in population. So does that mean we got an older group here in town, or?
Well,
what?
we have a large exiting senior class that's up over in the 40s, and our incoming kindergarten classes are showing to be in the 20s.
And the incoming kinder classes have been low numbers for a few years, and they're projecting to be the same for a couple more. And that's all really we know, right? We know the kids that are in preschool and.
Yeah.
So you're not going to recycle your senior class?
No, but definitely looking at just the population trends right now, for the next several years, our secondary schools are going to be heavier. They're in the 30s and 40s, but it's the lower grade levels. I think we've got, 2 grade levels that are at 40, but the others are under.
Yeah, more in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions for Shannon before we move on? Thank you. Thank you. Very, very well done. Thank you. And I'm going to move on then to, I think Robin has the facilities repair and maintenance. And I, for the assemblies, I sent Robin a note that I thought she did an outstanding job. I think it's going to pay her dividends in the long run, the work she's done.
This has been a labor of love that Aaron and I have been very heavily involved with. So I have talked at the borough meetings a lot about that code and condition survey. So the document that's been attached, this is a representation of over 400 pages of material condensed down to really just trying to identify everything that the code and condition survey has identified that needs to be done. And so Aaron and I have literally gone through that document page by page, hours on end in the district office. And if you saw the actual spreadsheet, you'd see that there's several tabs where we've identified by the the work that's happening this coming summer with the campus security upgrades, there's a tab that focuses just on the work that we've identified that could be done locally that maybe doesn't fit to be in a capital improvement project proposal to the state, but just a lot of little things that are adding up. And then the document that you guys have is everything sorted by type of work. So on page 1, it's everything that they identified for the site and infrastructure. You move on to the next page and it starts going into the substructures. If you flipped through these where you see the yellow highlighted items, those have been identified through our committee, being Sarah, Aaron, Shannon, and myself, as the most critical items that need to be addressed in the school district for upcoming future capital improvement projects. And so they're highlighted in yellow, but today we actually met and we identified the 3 major areas that we'll be focusing on for future CIP submittals, and that is the exterior substructure of the buildings, the ventilation underneath our elementary school and under the district office has got to be addressed, or we're going to have some significant concerns beyond what we already have, as well as our middle school stairs. They're crumbling. The elementary entrance is also needing to be replaced. So that in itself we're recognizing as one major project that we'll be working on. The second project, which is going to be the most significant cost measure, is the heating and ventilation system in the middle school and high school is outdated to the point that parts are not available. If it goes down, we may not be able to bring it back up. Aaron has, well, do you want to speak to what you've done over the years?
No, I mean, we've made it work for the time being. Fortunately, our PM program gives us a good guideline on monthlies, weeklies, and daily tasks, and make sure bearings are greased, everything's running properly. It's fine for now, but just in case, like 2 years, 3 years down the road, if something major happens, we might not be able to repair a ventilation fan because they don't make that shaft anymore. Back from the 80s, they're out of business. So we need to look at a more centralized ventilation system compared to all these separate mechanical spaces supplying heating and ventilation to certain parts of the building. Because now it's been upgraded, new technology is all. Our boilers heat the Parks and Rec gym side, also takes care of Boquet. I mean, it's a
So that's
building.
this, yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
That's that, and combining with that, the electrical upgrades across the district. That's our second major project that we'll be working towards submission on our CIP. And then the third is more roof replacement at the vocational building and the district office. But there's a whole heck of a lot more identified in here. I think, what was the summarization? And the 26 million is where it's at right now. If we, had a Rebecca's pot of gold and we're able to just get in there and take care of everything that's identified. The numbers that are showing are the estimates through LCG's computer system for replacement and the cost of labor. And they pushed that out to 2027 numbers when they did the code and condition survey for us.
Steve, can I ask you a question about the bond that we passed for the roof? If there is money remaining off that, can that be shifted? Do we write that such a way that could be shifted to another roof project or something else?
If I may, that's all been spent. So we spent that on the 2 projects this prior summer. And then we got 65% reimbursement from the state on one of those projects because we had a grant. And that is stretching those bond dollars so that we can do the project this summer. But it doesn't even fund the full project for this summer. It, but
The project in Shannon would be the other roof, is that, or?
No, this summer we're doing the campus security access upgrades. So doors, intercoms, lockdown system. And so those bond dollars got stretched with the state dollars that we got, the grant, which means that we can fund 1.1, maybe 1.2 million of this summer's project with those bond dollars. We're stretching that. But another 400,000 is coming from our capital fund. So.
Thank you. Anything else there, Robin, or you want to go?
I think those were the highlights. It was eye-opening to get this document. It had been, what, 2008 was the last time this had been done. And this is part of the work that Representative Himschoot was speaking to, that not all districts have the capacity or resources to even have this accomplished. And the work that comes out of this has helped guide where we're going to go with our capital improvement project submission lists. So we are in a better position to score higher on those projects.
One of the things.
What does that represent? Oh, this itself cost $115,000.
And to jump in, and Robin and Shannon have probably already experienced this, we're seeing pretty major cost up where our estimates are out of date almost from the minute they're done.
Yes, that's correct.
Which drives costs. I mean, I don't know, Aaron, you have any examples that come to the top of your head? But I mean, we've had several of these projects come in way high on bids.
Just off the top of my head, recently we've had, first of all, the sewer line at Parks and Rec, which out of the gate, we were not able to award a contract on that bid. Another one is Banana Point, where we were, all of the bids came in substantially higher than the engineer's estimate. So.
Anyway, heads up if you haven't already experienced it. It's pretty crazy. I mean, we see project after project coming in. And I don't know if it's the engineers that are doing the estimates have not caught up with inflation or what's causing it, but we're seeing it pretty much across the board.
Materials have
Yes.
gone up.
Yeah.
Parts, unbelievable. Everybody's facing it.
I think that's a big part of it, Rob, is the Made in America, Buy America. It's expensive.
I get my parts from New Zealand. They're expensive too. It's crazy. Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up is just it's important to remember when we start going into these projects, it's like, how much do we set aside as contingency, or how much do we set aside to get a good bid? Because it's, it hurts when you think you have the money and then find out you're, in our case, what was it, 400,000 under, Steph, on the aquatic center side? I mean, or the bids were, or the costs were much greater than what we expected. Anyway.
And if I might jump in, that aquatic center project is, Parks and Rec falls under Deed's school facilities list, since it's used a lot by the school. We're definitely monopolizing a lot of the time. So that was the highest scoring project that we had at number 22 on the list that Representative Himschoot, was talking about. And we think it would score a lot higher if once the project is substantially completed this summer or completed, that in August, we do a reapplication for the major maintenance grant application instead of reuse of score. Because once something's bid, it scores higher. Once it's in the work, it scores higher. Once it's completed, it scores higher, right? Because then you're getting closer and closer to them actually knowing, oh, that's what it actually cost. When you're just only have plans, well, those estimates can be really off. So scores higher. And then also we had ranked that one at number 4 priority on our list and the gym sewer line at number 2, but that gym sewer line scored much lower. It was like at 44 on the list. And so if we prioritize Aquatic Center at place 2, that gives it automatically 6 more points on the ranking system with the state. And so if we do a reapplication this year and prioritize it at number 2, swap those 2 projects, which we talked about today and made that decision, we think it might be able to get funded next year or have a much better chance if there's any real capital dollars coming from the state.
One of the challenges is, and I asked Rebecca that question, which is, the state puts these programs together, so these big deferred maintenance programs for the school, and we have a similar project for the harbors, but they're not funding them anymore. I mean, or at least not like they used to. And that's making it hard. I mean, so anytime these projects come about, it's almost, we have to self-fund them, and the school's probably running into that same issue where you can't really expect to get money from the state. Anyway, I mean, Aaron's facing it. I mean, we have to basically go through our projects and figure out what can we afford to do and what do we have to put off and hope that it stays put together long enough to deal with it.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. So when the roof got funded, it was at the 13th spot on the ranking list. And that was like, oh my gosh, they funded to 14 or 15. And we were like, no way, a 13 spot got funded. We didn't expect that. And that was huge. But then like the year before that, I think they only funded 5 projects. And then Representative Himshoot said earlier, they only funded 3 this last time. So like in this current fiscal year that's getting funded. So it would take a lot to get it up high enough. Like we probably feel like we need to be in the top 10 to have a shot.
Thank you. Anything else, Robin, on that?
We're happy to answer any questions you guys might have, but it sounds like
There's a lot of information here.
there is.
Digest.
Robin, I actually do. So when it comes to like the engineering and design work, does Deed tell you where to go, or do you actually get a choice? Okay.
Yeah. That year that I got, had signed the contract, and Erica was actually the ramrod behind this, but it went out to bid as to which engineering firm we worked with, and
Yeah, we
I
have
don't remember how many we had.
3 or 5?
I feel it, yeah. Services.
We've had some luck with watching carefully who we give engineering to, because some of them are more, some of those folks are more expensive than others. But I wasn't sure if your system forces you into a certain list of engineers or something. Okay.
Hi, thank you. So, and forgive me if I'm not like totally up to date on all this. I'm still basically a freshman as well. So when you guys are saying, we're gonna do okay of 2027, getting a little worried in 2028 in the future, right? That comes from the dollars from the state, and then we, the borough, give you about 3 million to work with right now. That 3 million that we give, does that it sounds like it goes to mainly capital projects, or no, it does not.
So the bond that the borough went out for, that was just for capital projects, but the annual general operating fund revenue that we ask for each year is what that 3.25 million is this year and 3.4 million last year.
And what is that being used for?
That's our general operating fund. So what's in that budget simulation? It's that. It's the
It's that.
teachers, it's the, it's
So what
the
did you guys
curriculum,
do
it's
prior
eating.
to us funding to 3 million? You just dealt with it? We only funded like 1 million prior to it, right?
1.8 before it went up. Yeah.
And so then how was the schools doing so well with much less money?
Okay, if I may, so the BSA has been flat for a long time, so each year it gets harder and harder. And we did just get a BSA increase, but before that it had been flat funded for a
Right.
long time. So each year we had less and less purchasing power. And then, I don't know if you remember, but during COVID, things got way more expensive. And then also our student enrollment was declining and we kind of fell below some threshold, like in the funding formula, there's a school size factor. And so if you have a smaller school, you get more per student than if you're at a huge school, because some of those overhead costs are spread amongst more students. So yeah, I mean, when kids shift from one school to another, sometimes then one school is falling off like a higher per student rate. It fluctuates every year. But mostly inflation and flat state funding.
So then, we are,
For
Okay.
years, we didn't ask for more because we were able to do it, but also as staff retired, we didn't replace them. So honestly, we had staff taking on more responsibilities in order to balance our budget. And that went on for many years. And then with COVID, during COVID, we did get a dump of money from the federal government, which helped us float for a while as things started to go up again, the cost of, but for many years, it was related to not replacing staff. You know, at one point, you used to have 3 administrators, now we have 2, you know, in the 3 schools. We used to have swimming year-round. We now have it half of the year. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Some of our sped teachers were not replaced. Some, we don't have a fully,
even with $3 million, they're not being replaced.
Yeah, yeah.
Slowly cut over the years.
Yeah. A lot of it was retirements that weren't replaced. For a while there, when, you know, we didn't have a librarian at the elementary school, we had people filling it. You know, there's some of that was just kind of, I wouldn't want to say a shell game, but it was moving people around in order to try and fill holes, because we didn't know. And it was kind of one of those where we got to the point where we're like, we can't do this anymore. We have to go to the borough and ask for more money.
So then.
And that's when it went from 1.8 to 2.5, I'm thinking, or 3 maybe.
No, I think it
Yeah.
jumped up, right?
And then yeah, it was 1 year of 2 and then it went up to 3. So that's part of it, was us trying to be conservative at the district, knowing the borough is not flush with money for the same reason. You're dealing with the same things we are. So it did feel a little guilty, you know, like, oh, do we ask for more money if we can still kind of keep limping along over here?
So we're able to, right now, I'm just gonna use 3 because it's an easy number to go, but we have 3 million that runs our schools, K through 12, great. And then we get this huge thing. And so when we say we're working on them, we really are relying on like with the state to fund this. So like these $1,000, $2,000 things, we're not even touching those until we get some kind of funding.
No, I think we have some of them that are going to be done in-house. I mean, if you go through, you can see, I think it's on the right side. Is
Through
that where we have
the
it?
3 million that we're getting.
Yeah. In-house, like if you look on that first page, you can see on the far right corner, some of that stuff, the little stuff can be addressed in-house or even locally, probably through the general fund, but at some point, yeah.
Is there, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure I understand like the whole picture here. So I just want to, is there any other ways aside from us and BSA that funds these? So when you say in-house, that comes from all that, basically. Okay. That's.
Well, your class, James, was the first in decades smallest class. 2010. I remember it. Tom was in there. We looked up and went, oh, wow. Because for a while there, we had 55 to 65 kids. And so it's a both and. You know, you have to get rid of teachers because there's no longer 60 kids in the classroom. There's 40, 42, 38, 35. I think you guys had like 34 maybe or something, 30, something like that. Like, oh, things are changing now. And you start looking down into the elementary school and I mean, there's classes of 22, 24. And so that's part of the issue as well. I mean, you do get rid of staff, but you have less students and then there's less money from the state. So it's
I'm just like more.
it is complex. You got to, I mean, it's a lot to wrap your mind.
Yeah, because thank you. You know, you said on your little formula that 3.7, 3.8 is coming for the ask, and you're like, oh man, okay, that's like it's getting more and more and more and more and more, but we're losing students, and I'm just trying to think of all the avenues that revenue's coming in and what that is needed for, and then if we are the ones that have to be the ones that vote for higher or lower, or or the city, whatever, using that tool, which is really helpful to help me like make that decision. But it's just kind of wild to, it's good to know where things are coming from for me. And I'm a little bit behind on this, I guess, but
So
yeah.
let me jump in if I could. So what happens is jointly in our separate parts of town, so the school's working on their budget to finalize it, and they're gonna get to a point where they've done everything they can do, and they're very good at that. The borough does the same thing on our end. And, you know, it's things like we get benefit quotes. Schools victim, just like we are, we're all waiting. It's hard to finish a budget until you know what your benefits are gonna cost. And basically, so the borough puts its budget together, the school puts their budget together. And then we end up usually having a meeting, say, okay, what do we do now? And how do we balance it for both groups? And it's never simple. It'd be great if the state would raise the BSA or fix this problem they have with funding. But the chance of that happening is probably not great right now. And, you know, the borough has money put aside. We have secure roll schools that we got our retroactive payment, if you hadn't heard. So, and we'll get another payment later in the year. And that's money that we can move to the school as needed.
What
But
we
at some
did-
point, we will run out of that, and then
Right.
it's a harder conversation.
The other option we have is to bank it for them too, and so that we preserve ourselves for a little bit for the future.
Kind of what we do now. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the school wants money from that account, they get money from the account. The whole challenge is, you know, right now we're early in the process. School's working through it, the borough's working through theirs. And then, you know, we'll all get together at some point and go, okay, how bad is it? And we start to figure out how do we make that work? And, you know, we've been able to do it year after year, getting close enough to make it work. So we still have a good school system, and the borough is taking care of what we need to take care of. But if this doesn't change, if how the school is funded from the state, if it's all gonna fall on the borough, it's gonna start being a little more painful. I mean, we're talking about raising taxes. Well, we have a tax cap.
Yeah, we have a
We
tax
can only
cap.
raise taxes so much. So then it's cutting services. And, you know, it's things like, you know, hours at the library, hours at the pool, all the things that none of us really want to touch. But, you know, we'll get to that point at some point. I mean,
Yeah, we're not, and looking at this, like you and I were talking, the secure rural schools money is going down because the amount of revenues coming into the Forest Service and so forth are going down. And so those are I think, going to continue to drop. And that formula is a little tough to watch. So, yeah, well, that's another factor involved with this. Yeah,
and we're
All right.
trying to build a hospital.
yes.
So add that
Yeah,
to the
so all
story.
that- Yes, we've had that discussion. And with that, I do want to, before I close it up, I wanted to go by 7:15, but I do want to talk about the housing. If the manager would do that, we're not asking. What we want to do is that we're trying to figure out whether we're on the right track, because we've done a lot. And the assembly had we had a work session, and we've looked at some other options, and I agree that we can only do 2 or 3 things. You know, we just don't have the resources to do everything we want. And so if the manager would, I let him take over and talk to it just for a little bit.
Yeah, yes, I can speak to that. So we continue to make strides on housing. We can't move as fast as what we'd love to. It's expensive. We've got the airport addition, which is the property above Hammer and Weecon. Tlingit and Hyde is going to be adding 20 lots up there, and they're paying for all the infrastructure. And they give 9 of those lots to the borough to sell. And so we don't have to collect the cost of the infrastructure back because they're paying for it. So that's really cool. That'll be 20 lots on the open market. The hope is that helps some group. I continue to believe we have the Skylark project that Sig and Amber are working on. That's up to 40 lots, mainly, I think, manufactured homes, but we need that as well. And we've got a couple of private developers that are higher end properties that, you know, are going up near Sandy Beach. I think we need more multifamily. higher end multifamily. The borough's looking at 8th Street. We own 4 lots, two lots on each side of 8th Street between, Haugen and the church. Those are all zoned multifamily, and I'm in the process of trying to get a quote from Hildy, our local architect, to, draw some pretty pictures. What could we put in there from a standpoint of multifamily, tiny homes, fourplexes. If she comes back with a good number and I can get approval from the assembly, we'll have her do some design work, just kind of saying, here's what you could do. Do we want more elder housing that's single story, not assisted living, and there's a lot of room up there. Those are pretty sizable lots. So the borough's gonna try to look at that, but development costs up there are pretty high. We're talking 4 or 5 million to just get the infrastructure in, and we don't have the money for that. But we have to start somewhere, and that's getting a design and then trying to reach out to the community to say, what are you interested in? That's where the mayor was coming from, is from trying to, for those of you on the school board and or Robin's case, having to hire people, are you having that issue? My assumption is it's happening to all of us, and therefore, doing something like what I'm talking about with multifamily might help. Again, nicer apartments, but we don't know that. So if you have great ideas, send them to us, send them to me. We're going to keep working through it. We don't have the resources to build it out ourselves, but maybe we can come up with some kind of a good deal for a developer that they're willing to come in and build something for the borough's contribution for some of the infrastructure. I don't know yet. But it is, again, our assumption was that the school's facing that as a hiring issue as we are, and just wanted to confirm it.
Yeah, it certainly is a hiring issue, and we're just appreciative that Sarah's on the board and a quick resources helping
Been a
to
challenge.
support finding
Yeah.
housing for folks.
It's hard, yeah.
Okay. Give a chance. Okay, I'm just gonna close it out, but I'll give you
Okay.
one more question here.
Last thing, since this is the work session with the school, thank you for giving this all to us. It's definitely very eye-opening of the things that need to be fixed and all that. But however, being the school, I would like to know how the kids are doing. From last we were here, I remember, and I was really young into this, that you went and you gave us test scores and you kind of were doing all that, right? And I'm just curious, we funded more. It seems like we're keeping staff, which is huge. How are our kids doing? And that's it. Thank you.
I so appreciate you asking that, because it really is about the kids. And I would say when you look at our data, which Shannon and I were toying around with, do we want to update them with the data this year or not? And so we chose to just focus on the budget. It's consistent with what you saw last year. Like, we continue to be anywhere from 10 to 20 percentage points above state averages in testing across the board. That comprehensive literacy statewide development grant that we received this year, it's a 5-year grant. It's really helping us focus on literacy efforts from birth to grade 12. And just even last night, our CLSD teacher team hosted an evening event down at WAVE where they were talking just about Sounds First approach. Our preschool teacher was sharing just basic sign language signs to use with children and infants. And she was speaking to the importance of that and the literacy components that are behind it that really impact their future. And it was heartwarming to be sitting among the teachers in the district from preschool to grade 12 teachers, and they were each standing up and just sharing, and with some of our families in the community with younger children. So I'm encouraged by what I see happening with that grant, and then just the wealth of information we have in our teachers across the district, because you can see it play out in the students. Just yesterday and today, we had our 5th and 6th grade and 3rd and 4th grade Battle of the Books kids at the district office. for their annual battle and listening to their excitement through the closed door of whether they were getting the answers right or wrong. It's so heartwarming to see those efforts of just the time involved to study the materials, to be prepared to answer them for the Battle of the Books competition. So to answer your question, our kids are doing very, very well.
Thank you.
Other question from the assembly or from the school board for us? Well, everybody's kind of quiet. It must be that time. Yeah, I've had an opportunity here this last week to, unfortunately, be all over Southeast here and talking to some of the other mayors and so forth. And I really want to thank the school board and yourself, Robin, and folks for what you've done for us after I've seen some of the other things. Much appreciated. Please just keep up the good work. That's all we're asking. And with that, I'll call it a call. We're adjourned.